welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're tackling ethical supervision in behavior analysis.
Right.
And we're going to be looking at a chapter from a professional ethics text.
Good.
Should be interesting.
Definitely. It's really important, making sure that new behavior analysts can, handle all the ethical stuff. It's important.
Yeah, totally. It's not just about, the actual techniques, right?
Right.
It's about using them ethically.
Yeah.
Making good decisions.
Yeah, judgment. Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that supervisors really need to be thinking about?
Well, this chapter, right off the bat, it just hits you with this, ton of information. Forms from the BACB and, logs, different kinds of meetings, supervision stuff. It's a lot.
Yeah, sounds like it.
It is. And it just, it really highlights how much responsibility these supervisors have.
It's like they're giving you this huge toolbox.
Uh-huh.
You got to know what each thing does and when to use it.
Exactly. And then you have to teach that to somebody else.
Right.
Which brings us to, the how. The ways you can supervise,
Mm-hmm.
live, video, all that. The chapter really makes you think about picking the best way, the most effective.
Yeah. It's like that example in here with the electrician, right?
Oh, yeah.
The electrician thinks they said to turn the power off, but the apprentice doesn't actually check.
Oh, no.
And then, boom, sparks everywhere.
It could have been really bad, just bad supervision,
Yeah.
If you don't do it right, the consequences can be serious. I mean, supervisors are shaping the future of behavior analysts.
Right. It's not just checking things off a list.
No.
They're shaping how they're going to act.
Yeah.
And speaking of responsibility, the chapter talks a lot about caseloads.
Yeah, caseloads. That's a big one.
And, that pressure to take on more, even if it's not really ethical.
Totally. I mean, everyone feels it, right? The pressure to do more, see more clients.
Yeah.
This chapter mentions a BCBA. They were supposed to be handling, get this, 75 billable hours a week.
Oh, wow.
Way too much. You can't ethically do that.
It's good that BCBA pushed back, though.
Yeah, they did.
They actually did one of those time studies.
Time and motion.
Yeah, tracking everything they did all day.
It's a good reminder. You have to advocate for yourself. If it's too much, you got to say something. You owe it to yourself and your clients.
Right. Having that data from the time study is huge.
It is. It backs you up.
Okay, so we've talked about all the information supervisors need, managing those ethical caseloads. But what about the actual training?
Now, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The chapter talks a lot about how it's not just a one-time thing. It's ongoing.
Right.
You're constantly giving feedback, watching, adjusting.
Makes sense.
Even little mistakes can have a big impact down the road.
Yeah, they gave that example. Tiffany, the RBT.
Tiffany, right.
Getting all this, good job feedback, but nothing specific.
Exactly. And because of that, she wasn't performing well.
Yeah.
You need clear feedback, both formal and informal, even if it's hard to give sometimes,
Yeah, totally. It's one thing to tell someone they're a good cook.
Right.
It's another to be okay, maybe add a little more salt next time.
Exactly. And especially in behavior analysis, we're dealing with people's lives. You got to be specific. And speaking of real world stuff, the chapter talks about incorporating diversity into training.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Especially now that it's in the ethical code. You can't just say you get it. You got to actually do it.
Exactly. And they illustrate this really well with that story about the RBTs in the break room.
Oh, man.
Remember that?
Yeah, they were saying those really insensitive things about new trainees, assuming they were only hired because of some, diversity quota.
Awful, right? And they didn't even realize someone else could hear them.
It's so easy for that unconscious bias to sneak in.
It really is. So it's a good reminder for all of us to look at ourselves,
Totally. Even if we think we're being fair, there's always room to grow. Like that saying, check your blind spots.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about these trickier situations, the chapter also dives into ending supervision.
Oh, yeah. Terminating supervision.
Right.
That can be tough.
Yeah, especially if it's because of the supervisee's behavior.
Definitely.
And they don't hold back. They share this story about a supervisee who just disappeared, ghosted their supervisor, and then suddenly pops up months later needing signatures.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. It shows why you need to be really clear from the get-go.
Right.
Solid contracts, outlining everything, and a way to track any performance issues.
Yeah, got to be prepared.
Absolutely.
Speaking of being prepared, I was surprised by how the chapter called out those companies, the ones that say supervision is free, but then slap trainees with this huge bill if they leave early.
Yeah, that's really ethically questionable. It's like you're trapping someone.
Totally. It makes you think about all those power dynamics, We have a responsibility to make sure things are ethical everywhere.
We do.
Okay, we just flew through a ton. Paperwork, training, feedback, ethical supervision, it's a lot.
It is. We've only just scratched the surface here. This chapter just shows how many ethical dilemmas are out there.
So important to have that good foundation, know where to go for help when things get tough.
Exactly. It's not about knowing it all. It's about knowing where to find the answers.
Right. You can talk to colleagues, mentors, organizations.
Yeah. Collaboration is key.
Two heads are better than one, for sure.
Absolutely. And another thing this chapter emphasizes is always evaluating. You can't just go through the motions.
Right. Got to actually see how it's going.
Yep. Get that data, see the results, and use that to improve.
It's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. For both people, the supervisor and the supervisee, you got to be open to feedback, even from your supervisee.
Yeah, that's how you get better, like holding up a mirror.
I like that.
Speaking of tools, the chapter talks about this behavior analytic dashboard thing.
Oh, yeah, it's cool. You're basically taking all those data skills we use with clients and using them on supervision.
Interesting. So you're tracking how the supervisee is doing.
Exactly. It's like a personalized roadmap for each one.
That's awesome.
Helps you work smarter, not harder.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, as we dig more into this chapter, something that really got me thinking was how technology can either make ethical supervision easier or more complicated.
Yeah.
Especially now that so much is done remotely. It's wild, right? Like, we have these amazing tools for talking to each other and keeping track of data.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's harder to really connect when you're not face-to-face. You know?
For sure. It's like a trade-off, right? You can supervise from anywhere.
Right.
But you might miss those little things you'd catch in person.
Totally.
Like someone shifting around or their tone.
Exactly.
And then there's all the software for tracking data.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Got to be so careful about privacy, making sure it's stored ethically.
It feels like the rules are always changing.
They are, constantly.
We got to stay on top of it, make sure we're doing things the right way.
Absolutely. And this chapter really emphasizes that ethical supervision, it's not like one and done.
Right.
You're always thinking, learning, adapting.
It's like we have to be ethical chameleons.
Yeah, I like that.
Blending in, changing with everything around us.
Adapting to the environment.
Exactly.
And speaking of adapting,
Yeah.
this chapter ends with a question that really gets to the heart of it all.
Okay.
It asks, how can we use technology to make supervision better but still ethical, especially with everything being so remote now?
Whoa. Yeah, that's the big one.
Right.
No easy answers.
Not at all.
But we got to be talking about it, figuring it out.
100%. And I think it starts with acknowledging both sides.
Right. The good and the bad.
Exactly. We can't just jump into every new thing without thinking about the ethics.
Right. Got to ask those hard questions.
Yes. Like, how do we protect client privacy when we're using online platforms? What about confidentiality? How do you build that sense of connection when you're remote?
So important.
It is. And maybe the biggest question of all,
Yeah.
how do we make sure that technology is helping supervision, not replacing those core parts?
The mentoring, the guidance.
Exactly. The human connection.
That's what it all comes back to, right? Being human.
Yes. Technology is just a tool. It's up to us to use it the right way.
Ethically and effectively.
Exactly. We can't forget that we're supporting another person.
Right.
Helping them grow, develop their skills, make good decisions, be compassionate and ethical.
This deep dive has really made me think about all of that.
Me too.
It's easy to overlook ethical supervision,
Yeah.
but it's so fundamental.
It really is. And this is just the start of the conversation.
Right.
Keep thinking about this stuff. Talk to your colleagues. Reflect on your own practices.
Yes. Keep the conversation going.
Because like we've seen today, it's not about having all the answers.
It's about asking the right questions.
Learning and growing along the way.
Love it. Now, I'm curious about something else this chapter talks about. It really makes you think, like, how do we make sure we're using these tools in a way that's actually helpful, not making things harder, you know?
Yeah, it's a balance. The technology is amazing, don't get me wrong. But it's not a magic solution.
Right. We still need all those other skills.
Exactly. Empathy, good judgment, knowing when to, pick up the phone instead of just sending another email.
Totally.
Yeah.
And this chapter, it made me realize how much I rely on seeing someone's face, you know, reading their expressions when I'm supervising.
Yeah, those nonverbal cues are huge. And they don't always translate through a screen.
Exactly. It's like I can tell when someone's confused, even if they don't say anything.
Right. Or if they're getting overwhelmed or excited about something. We lose some of that nuance remotely.
We do. And it makes me wonder, like, how do we create that same level of trust, that sense of connection when everything's virtual?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I don't think there's one right answer. It takes effort from both people.
It does. Being extra clear in your communication. Making time for those check-ins, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah, showing that you're invested in the relationship, not just checking boxes.
Totally. And being open to feedback, right? Like
Right.
asking your supervisee, hey, is this working for you? What could we do differently?
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's about their growth, their development as an ethical and competent behavior analyst. Technology can support that, but it can't replace the human element.
That's such a good point. We have to remember that. And I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the nuts and bolts of supervision to these really big picture ethical questions.
We really have. It's been fascinating.
It has. And I hope this has encouraged everyone listening to keep these conversations going. Talk to your colleagues, your mentors, even your supervisees.
Absolutely. Challenge each other, learn from each other, and keep pushing to make this field the best it can be.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those ethical compasses pointed true north.